Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining me again. It's Britain Oz here, another Armchair Pundit segment. My latest video was one about my predictions in the Six Nations, and today we're going to talk about Tier 2 rugby nations, how they're treated, how they're left behind, and how we could maybe look at pushing them to the forefront of the game and expand the game globally. I think it's a very big issue in the rugby world. If something isn't done about this soon, it's never going to get done. Those teams are going to get left so far behind, there'll be no coming back for them. Expansion is good for the game, it's needed for the game, and it's just healthy. It just generates healthy competitions. Now, I believe a lot of these teams are being left behind. What do you mean by Tier 2 nations? Well, we mean probably the sort of teams that aren't playing in those major international competitions such as the Six Nations and the Rugby Championship. So we're looking at maybe the likes of Fiji, Japan, Georgia, Samoa, Tonga, Romania, USA, Canada, Namibia, Uruguay, all those kind of teams. You might even put in Italy amongst those lot because they are kind of on the border. Yes, they're playing in the Six Nations, but they're not really competing, and they could, on their day, lose to any other Tier 2 nation. So you might put Italy in with that lot. Let's all agree the fact that they are being left behind, and it is not a good thing for rugby. Now, what's the reason for this? I believe personally there's a bit of a cartel in the IRB to keep those top nations at the top, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are generating the money, they're the ones that got the population. If you look at expanding the game, if you look at pumping money into maybe the sort of second tier nations, those top unions, the English Rugby Union, the New Zealand Rugby Union, Ireland, Australia, Wales, South Africa, they're all going to lose money. They're not going to get the level of funding from the IRB that they're used to, because that money is going to have to go into the second tier because they're trying to push it. Now, obviously, you've got to say that if you're in that position as a top tier nation, you want to keep that, because you want to grow the game in your own country. And Australia at the moment is in a very bad place for its homegrown players because it hasn't necessarily got the money that it needs. So even further reduction in IRB could really spell trouble for the Wallabies. That's for sure. It's a very, very difficult position for everyone at the moment to be in financially. The second tier, this is where it begins. The second tier nations do need that money, and it's not really up to individual nations such as New Zealand, England, and Ireland, and so on and so forth to be shelling out money. Now, there was a point made when Fiji played England at Twickenham in the autumn internationals. England gave Fiji £75,000 as a goodwill gesture for coming, and this made the news, and everyone was mortified because England generated somewhere close to about £10 million from this game. And then was like, well, £75,000, that is nothing when you compare to see what England made from it. And yes, they are right. However, England were under no obligation whatsoever to give Fiji any money from that game. And yet they did it. And yes, they probably tight 75 grand, but they gave them something, I suppose. The way that teams would normally recoup the money from the games they've played is when, say, the tours were returned. So, for example, if England went and then toured, say, New Zealand would get the gate receipts from that, so on and so forth. The problem with this is that England haven't toured Fiji since 1991. So Fiji are not getting that return income, which makes it very, very hard for them. Fiji have got to pay for their players to get to Europe, get all the kit, all that kind of stuff. They've got the same expenses as the big boys, but yet aren't getting the same level of funding. So it's always going to cause an issue, and it's something that needs to be sorted out. The IRB just needs to cut its funding to the bigger nations that have the bigger bank balances and send it to the way of the Tier 2 nations. Teams like Georgia, they have very, very good backing from their ex-president. He's a billionaire. He just likes the game, so he's backing them. Hence their sort of success. They've got players playing France. They've got a relatively successful national team. The Russian team, they're backed pretty heavily as well. They've hired some good coaches, some good English coaches, and their sevens results are really picking up. 15s as well. They are competing in that sort of second tier competition, which is really, really good to see. It seems like Portugal have dropped off in the World Cup 2007. Haven't really sort of seen them run the trap since. Spain, again, you kind of want to see them playing too. South American teams like Uruguay, they're in the World Cup which is fair play, but their sort of pathway to World Cup's not necessarily the hardest. Brazil are really pushing, they're about to break through, and you look at the population of Brazil, you're not going to ever compete with football, but at least you can give them a second option. Namibia, for example, they should be competing, they should be really pushing, but again, with those guys, it just comes down to funding. It's all to do with funding, all to do with money. At the end of the day, rugby is a professional sport, and therefore it's a business. So of course you're going to back your biggest money makers. But in my view, the IRB, the top tier nations, are just shooting themselves in the foot by not generating more competition globally. How do we go about expanding it? How do we go about getting these tier 2 nations to progress? Not just on the balance sheet, but also on the rugby field as well, which is another big thing. Well, I believe that all teams who don't play in the Six Nations or Rugby Championship should have to play at least one game a year against a team outside of the top 10 rankings, and at least one game every 2 years away to one of those teams. So they have one game, their biannual game against a team that's outside at home, and then they'll return the favour or play a different team away. And I would encourage them to visit Georgia, to visit Romania, to even visit, say, Namibia and Russia. Don't just stick to, say, Samoa and Fiji and Tonga, because, once every team plays their game, then hopefully it will just spread the games out a little bit more, and they won't just have, say, 3 teams lining up to play Fiji, because that would just do no one any good whatsoever. There are going to be some loopholes with this, in that the top tier teams might end up sending, say, a second team to play, which again is not the worst thing in the world, but you want to get some of your sort of bigger star names to play down there. So you might, I don't want to see the Maori All Blacks going to, say, Romania or Canada to play those games. I want to see a good New Zealand team going to those countries. Same with England. Don't be sending the Saxons to play Russia or Kenya or whoever it is. Send a good team to play. That's how you grow the game. Another avenue possibly is expanding the Six Nations. Now, news has recently come out saying there won't be any relegation promotion from the European Championship, I think it's called, where Romania and Georgia and Russia and all that kind of play, which is fine, I guess. I would like to see promotion relegation. I think it would create much more of a exciting competition towards the bottom end rather than just looking at wins. But now, mind you, can't always get what you want. So it's kind of says Italy's baking this year, I guess. But I am keen to see more teams in Europe competing at a top level, not just amongst each other, but I want to see the likes of Spain playing England and France, and Portugal playing these top teams, and Romania and Russia playing consistently against top teams. At what point do you stop going to competition? 6 teams is already quite a bit to play in a fairly condensed tournament. If they include Georgia, it'd be 7. I mean, that's getting quite big. I mean, you're going to get players away from their clubs for maybe 8 or 9 weeks, depending on the gaps in the games. How big is too big? Well, how about we introduce a biannual tournament? Say 10 teams in Europe, it's probably about 10. You could do 12. You could have maybe 2 pools of 5 or 2 pools of 6. Perhaps if you go to 12, your top 2 teams from each pool qualify for semis and the final. 3rd and 4th qualify for kind of play again, semi-final, final, and bottom 2 teams from each pool, if you have 12, could play for the bowl, semi-final, final. A lot like 7s. You could have that. In that case, if you have 10 teams, you're playing, say, 5 or 4 pool games, plus a semi, plus a final. That's 6 games. If you have, 6 teams, that's 5, 6, that's 7 games. Only one more than what you're playing. You could have it yearly, perhaps, or you can have it biannually, either side of the World Cup. Maybe, I'm not sure, but there are definitely ways that this can be done to incorporate these teams into the bigger competitions. I really hope it is done. I really hope we can see a change, and that these second tier nations are given a fair crack. It's only good for rugby. It's only a good thing. You look at football as a truly global game, and they get to play each other. You look at the European qualifiers, you get teams like San Marino playing France, which is brilliant. It's excellent. I want to try and get to that kind of stage with rugby too. But guys, I want to hear any thoughts you've got, whether you agree with me, disagree with me. Please let me know. Any other thoughts about maybe expanded European competition? Anything that you've got. Thanks very much, guys. I'll see you next time.